Well, hi everyone. I'm Jace Chambers. I manage all of our education and community engagement programs here at Opera Lafayette. And I want to say thank you so much for attending our last Salon series of the season, featuring Les Fêtes de Thalie, which is coming to DC May 3rd and May 4th, and coming to New York on May 7th. Now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic on to Rebecca Harris-Work, one of our lead scholars this season, and she's going to introduce our guest speakers tonight.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be back at another salon, and I think this one is going to be particularly exciting because we have people that are intimately involved with putting the performance on stage, and you're going to be hearing about some of those processes as the rehearsals are just starting, but they're already thinking and working on this and getting ready for what's happening. I just want to remind you about a couple of things about this work that impact how all of them are thinking about what they're doing. First of all, remember that Les Fêtes de Thalie hasn't been put on. It was very, very popular in the 18th century, but no parts of it have been staged, as far as anybody knows, since the late 18th century. So this is a chance for you to see practically a premiere, certainly a modern premiere of a work. But also in 1714, when the work was performed, it was not a mythological story, but one that was set in its own time in 1714. So the production that you're going to see now makes a lot of sense when you think about making it in order to reconstruct what the audiences in 1714 felt like they were seeing, which was their own selves on the stage in a way. That's going to be done in this production, bringing it maybe not up to 2024, but up to much closer to our very own time. And I'm going to be eager to see how that plays out as the rehearsals develop. And the other thing to remember is that Les Fêtes de Thalie is what's called an opera ballet, which means it's not a continuous story across all the acts, but there are actually 5 little pieces. There's the prologue and the epilogue that are related to each other. And then in the middle, there are 3 stories that have to do with women's love lives. So the first one is called The Girl. The next one is the coquettish widow. And the last one is the wife. So each one of these is different stories. Now that means that the singers now, as happened in the 18th century, are multicast. Everybody's singing more than one thing. So that part of the challenge in learning this is to be defining your character in each one of these and presenting different roles across the opera. And the same thing goes for the choreography. You know, each choreographic unit has to have its own integrity that relates to the story that's going on. So I think what I'm going to do is introduce the speakers rather than everybody all at once. I will do it a little bit individually, and we're going to start with Caroline Copeland, who's the choreographer for La Femme, the last one, and partly in the critique, the epilogue too, right? Is that correct, Caroline?
That is
Caroline is the associate director of the New York Baroque Dance Company, so has worked for a long time with Catherine Tarosi, who is directing the show. And this is it's wonderful to have that collaboration happening here too. She's fluent in many styles of dance, and I will ask her to talk to you about that a little bit. And she's teaching now at Hofstra University and at SUNY Purchase. And she's done lots and lots of choreography in Baroque and in other styles. So Caroline, could you talk a little bit about your background in dance and what you are bringing, you feel, to this particular show, which I think of it as new wine in old bottles, right? So tell us how you're approaching an 18th century piece, but from a contemporary perspective.
I was just going to say real quick, Caroline, before you start, if you guys have any questions while the speakers are talking, just put them in the chat, and I can always ask them for you later on. So just a reminder.
Thanks.
Okay, so hello everyone. I am versed in many styles of dance, as are all of the performers in the opera, the dancing actors in the opera. I trained in ballet growing up, modern dance, jazz. I did a little theater dancing. There was where I went to school at Goucher College. We also had a historical dance program, which looked at like ballroom dancing or popular dance forms from the Renaissance to the hustle, which will make an appearance at the end of the opera. And so when I am thinking about, I mean, and of course, I'm versed in 17th and 18th century dance forms. And so normally when I'm choreographing a Baroque opera, I'm usually choreographing in that vernacular, in the Baroque dance style. But when Catherine and I were talking about collaborating on this, some ideas immediately popped to mind when I was thinking of Hollywood glamour and Hollywood musicals, because I grew up watching musicals. And so I was thinking about a lot of different kinds of social dance styles. And of course, Baroque dance is a mixture of ballroom and theatrical styles. So I think that is a connection between many eras that I'll infuse into the choreography on stage. And then it's important to have a cast of dancers who can, Julian's going to break out some bravura ballet, 20th, 21st century ballet. There is a moment of some sassy ballroom dancing, something that looks more like contemporary jazz, I would say. And then there's a moment where they have to turn into more pantomimic actors. And Julian also choreographed a wonderful, Julian Donahue choreographed a wonderful duet for sailors that is more like in the spirit of, I would say, Jerome Robbins and On the Town. So there's a lot of different styles represented, except for 18th century ballet.
So, yeah, well, that's really interesting. I think we're all, I just can't wait to see all this. I'm so intrigued already about that. So could you talk a little bit more about how you feel listening to 18th century music at the same time that you're using these modern dance styles? There must be a certain amount of, I don't think dissonance is the right word. I mean, a kind of creative confrontation. Could you talk about that?
Yes. So, having seen a lot of modern productions of Baroque operas, I see a lot of wonderful dancing, but I also see a lot of choreographers who don't have an understanding of the rhythm and the character of the music. And so I hear rhythm and character in every single piece of music. It's all characterful. And so but sometimes it is hard, as I mentioned earlier, to square a circle. So I had this idea of Jitterbug Baroque. And so I said, well, let's try it in the chaconne. But the chaconne has, obviously, it's in 3, it's a totally different flow than the jitterbug or swing dance. And I kept like trying to push and pull this idea that just wasn't working. And so as a choreographer, you just have to, you just got to let things go, try something new. So I find the most challenging piece of music to be the chaconne, because every 8 bars it's changing and it's moving and it's flowing. And so there might be certain kinds of contemporary dance that render itself very well to a chaconne, but the Baroque dancer in me I cannot not hear those the rhythmic play in every single bar. And the Baroque dancer in me wants to bring out every note of every bar. So the chaconne I think that's been the most difficult music to try to bring in different kinds of ideas that are more contemporary in ballroom.
I can see the challenge in that, but that particular chaconne has some moments in it that are references to comic chaconnes for sure. And so I'm just wondering, are you trying to bring out humor in that as well?
Yes, well, so I think we have imagined it as a dance, a kind of a competition, a dance competition.
I'm going to interrupt you for a minute. The chaconne happens in the La Femme, in the ballroom scene, when there are, well, I don't know how it's going to be presented there, but in the way the libretto tells it, this is a part of it's a masked ball, and there are people that are the guests that dance. And then there are the wild characters that come in that are the masked characters, and you don't quite know who they are. And I think they're the ones dancing the chaconne, right?
Yes. So, I mean, so in terms of the choreographic arc of the La Femme part, the minuet is going to start out for the main singing couple, and then everyone will join in what may feel more like, a 19th century, more like a ballroom dance. The minuet it's beautiful. There's something very light but swingy about it that I'm trying to bring out. Something that's very tactile and sensate about that particular minuet I find so beautiful. And so that's for the group. And then it goes right into, in this version, it's going right into the Lour, which was the Spanish entree. And so for that, I did a lot of research into bullfighting because Catherine said, Julian should be a matador. And so I started looking at bullfighting videos, and the Lour is very characterful. It's like some lures can be, not all lures, because this is not like a pastoral lure. It feels a little pompous and a little pointed. And so when I was watching bullfighting, I was thinking, and sorry for those who are big bullfighting fans, but I find it funny, the pomposity of the bullfighter. And then when the bull comes at them, then they're running behind barriers and hiding behind people. So it's going to be virtuosic in terms of technical feat, more in the ballet style, but also something a little absurd. And then then there's a little break. And then when I heard the Forlan with Catherine, I'm assuming maybe in the original production, it might've been for a gondolier or an Italian character. But what I heard was something that sounded like a novelty dance out of the Lombranzi book, The New and Curious School of Theatrical Dancing from 1716. And so we thought it would be fun to do a kind of pantomime, a lesson for the gentleman in the audience of how to woo a lady. So that's more of
appropriate for the story, it certainly is.
Yes, making connections to the story there. And so that's more in the realm of what I would call a novelty dance. And then the chacun should just be about movement. There are some comic moments in it, but I'm still trying to find out how to bring in more sweeping movement, because in contemporary choreography today, there's lots of sweeping gestures, but you don't necessarily move anywhere in space. But Baroque music is also moving in space. And so what I'm trying to massage right now is how to keep the flow in space happening, and not just a static shape-shifting kind of form, but something that really sweeps through the space, which is just a little tricky to do when you're in a contemporary vernacular, because it's not like a big heroic chacun. There is something that is more playful and comical, something like the chacun for a harlequin. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's what I was just going to say one more thing, that Caroline and I know each other from way back for a long time. She's performed at Korneel where I teach, and let's see, what year was it when you did Le Carnaval de Venise at the Boston Early Music Festival, and you were the choreographer for that. And the Carnaval de Venise is one of the operas that I was talking about in the last salon that were where the French started imitating their fantasy Venice. They wanted to bring it to Paris, the sort of playground that Venice was, and showing people in masked balls or showing people gambling and Le Carnaval de Venise has a lot of that in there. And I'm wondering if, especially in La Femme, the last entrée, the one you were choreographing, which is the most similar to those Italian works that the French were doing, Italianate, I should say, works that the French were doing. I'm wondering if you are able to play off of your experience with that when you're coming to this choreography.
Yes, in terms of character.
Even though that time you were using Baroque style and this time you're not.
Yes. I mean, what I do realize, or I'm beginning to understand, is as a choreographer, I have a certain kind of humor that I bring to the style. So I think in the chacun, I'm just thinking about that's something that happened in the gondolier scene in Carnaval de Venise, where there was kind of a dance battle. And we know that people were doing these dance battles. People took their dancing seriously, especially in Spain. And so young men would take to the street and have dance battles and dance-offs. And one of the inspirations for some of the chacun in particular, and the very final contredanse at the end of the opera, I was thinking about, for those of you who might remember, there was a show called Dance Fever by Dan Aterio in the late 70s. And it was like this disco, it was a disco competition show. That was one inspiration. Another one was Solid Gold from the early 80s. It's very kitschy. So I was thinking about that kind of 80s sort of jazz dance. And then for the final contredanse, I was thinking of a dance from the 50s called The Stroll which people maybe do or don't remember, and the stroll and the hustle came to mind, because there's just something so playful and lively about the scenes. I didn't want to take what I was doing too seriously, but I want the dancers to exhibit a lot of virtuosity.
Well, I think this is really exciting. I'm really looking forward to it. And certainly this whole work is very playful in many ways.
Yes.
And Caroline unfortunately can't stay for this whole hour. So we're going to ask for questions for her now.
Carolyn and Becky?
Yeah.
I thought, hi. I thought maybe as long as we've got Korneel here, and you're talking about each of these character dances, that maybe he could just play the beginning of each of the dances that Caroline talked about.
That'd be great.
And
Wonderful.
to give a sense, just to give a sense of what they're talking about. Maybe first the
Idea.
minuet you were discussing. Can you all hear that?
A little bit. The
Not
sound,
very well. The sound is,
It's a little distant.
but I also think the tempo could be a little, I'm feeling like the minuet has this kind of like sensate quality to it, right? So I'm imagining something like bum ba da 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 dim ba da dim bum ba da 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 dum bum ba da 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 dum ba da dim bum. A little.
This is a working session. People
Right.
didn't know that. This is
Because
our
there's
first rehearsal together.
Right. There's between the characters, Pascale just as the character Caliste, right, is just saying she and Dorant just had this back and forth, and then I just felt like there should be something so like suave and sensate and a little sensual and like soft and swingy about the minuet. That was what I was imagining.
We will get that.
Okay, next.
What about the next? What you want to hear the Air Espagnol? Is that the?
Sure, the lure, yeah.
Oh, there's. Oh, just gonna speak to you.
I was gonna say, Ryan, I'm seeing in the comments, if there's a way for you to turn on original sound, it might pick up the harpsichord better.
Original sound. It is.
It is there already, yeah, because we're not getting the full.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to come to the show.
Yeah, you'll just.
Just have to
The
come
lure
to
is
the
a lot of
opera
fun
meeting.
though.
I would try. We have high fidelity on that. Let's try and see if that's any better.
Try one more time, yeah, which one?
No, it's not any better.
Unfortunately, it's not working. Oh, what a shame. Well, I would like to use this moment from Caroline talking about the singers who are going to be dancing in La Femme, the wife, because that brings us to Pascale, who's actually the one singing that role. And let me just introduce Pascale a little bit before we ask her to talk. And that is, many of you will have recognized her from previous Opera Lafayette productions, but which she's participated in several, and it's wonderful that she's here now. But she has a very, very broad performing career in many different styles of opera. And she has sung with so many opera companies and so many groups that I couldn't possibly list them all. So right now I'd like to ask you, Pascale, a little bit more to talk about about your roles, what you are doing here, your background in opera. The floor is open. Tell us about yourself.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's really nice to be here, and I feel really lucky to be part of this project, as every Opera Lafayette project has a special flavor, as you know, and really digs deep into the origins of the work, and it's really interesting, and I'm learning all kinds of things today because, like my colleagues, my singing colleagues, I arrived today you know, we're all arriving from either our hometowns or where we were performing before and coming together. Most of us don't know each other. I met Korneel 5 minutes ago, and now we're doing this panel with it together, which is kind of what the spirit of music and collaboration is. And so a few months ago, I received the beautiful score that he edited and started to work on it. And I started working on the recitative because I thought that was the hardest part to put together, you know, because French recitative, the French are very particular about the rhythm of the words. And I'm fortunate enough to be a native French speaker, but I still find it a challenge to respect the composer's intentions. And sometimes the composer's intentions, as I found out, is a little more flexible than what you see on the paper, you know. So I look forward to getting together with Korneel and my colleagues that I will be sharing the stage with to work those little intricacies out starting tomorrow morning. So yeah, in a few minutes they'll all come and we'll read the English translation of the libretto, so we all know, you know, what the story is, because I'm guilty of this, of just, you know, looking at my role and what I'm doing and learning my notes and, you know, learning my arias and my duets and that, and then not really knowing what's going on. But I look forward to putting a face and a voice on the characters. So I think that really influences the characterization and the playfulness of the whole thing, because it is a very playful opera.
Now you're
Right.
playing 3 roles, and I realize you haven't started rehearsing them yet, so I'm not going to ask you how you're going to do them. You haven't worked that out yet, but I'm just wondering what the rehearsal process is, or the thinking process when you're approaching an opera, when you're, instead of singing one person, you're singing 3, and what that does for your conception of the work.
For my mental health. Well, I like to listen to what's going on. You know, I like to, because just for example, the first character I sing is La Veuve, and her introductory, I have introductory arias for my character, and her introductory aria is very simple, but it has a very beautiful flute accompaniment with continuo. And what that tells me is that this character is not a tragic character. You know, she's kind of not on the surface, but she likes to have fun and she likes to joke, you know, because the flute sound is very light and airy and bubbly. Whereas Caliste, who is La Femme, her introductory aria is much dense. The orchestration is denser. You know, it has flutes, it has strings, so like all the strings are playing. So it's very much her inner monologue is is richer in a way, and more deeper, I think. And not as light, although she does kind of brush things off at the end. But I'm looking forward to exploring whether that's her nature, or whether that's something that she does because what she has to do. You know, she kind of accepts the story of the La Femme is Caliste's husband fell in love with someone at a masked ball, not realizing that someone was his wife. And she's going to play a trick on him. You know, she's going to show up as this masked lady and say, "You must renounce Caliste," and see his reaction. And then at the end, she's like, "Oh no, okay, fine, you fell in love with me twice. Isn't that wonderful?" But you know, I don't know how sincere that is. So we'll have, these are decisions that I can't take until I work with colleagues and with the director. But there's, there are knowing that there are different avenues and if I come if I come to rehearsal and I'm like convinced that's what it is, it's not listening, and it's not being an open-minded colleague, and it's not serving the project that we're trying to bring together to fruition. Does that make sense?
Oh, and it makes all the sense in the world. It's wonderful. I'm so glad, because I think on work like this, there's so many subtleties and ambiguities, and deciding how to play them is really going to be crucial. And I'll be really interested to see when I think I'm going to get to see the dress rehearsal in Washington. So I will get one day in advance before I have to give my pre-opera talks. I will at least know something about what the production is doing. And that's just the process you're describing is really, really wonderful. Are there other people that would have questions or would like to ask Pascale or pursue any of these issues I
also want to touch on the terpsichore,
Oh, yes,
la critique.
yeah,
Because I was wondering, as I was learning it, I was like, well, she doesn't have a lot to say. And she doesn't talk very much, and her arias are really quite simple. I wouldn't say plain, because they're beautiful, but they're very like twinkle twinkle little star in a way.
No, that's because the
Yes, but
character. Yeah.
That's because, and then I found out that the role was written for a dancer who sang also in the opera, which made, which just brought it all together for me. Like, oh, and I was like, am I gonna have to dance? So we'll see tomorrow.
So have you done dancing? Have you danced?
I don't think sincerity will be your issue.
So Pascale, have you danced before in opera productions?
Very badly.
Well, Caroline will get you doing something beautiful, I'm sure.
I look forward to it.
Yes, no worries. The whole point is to everybody has to look like they own whatever the gestures are. It's a mixture of like gesture and rocking, and it should be as flirtatious and sensuous as the dialogue back and forth, right? So no worries. It's gonna be fabulous.
Were there any questions?
Yeah, well, there's some people that had there surely must be things to ask here of our two speakers to date.
The best is yet to come.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I'll ask a question.
Please.
It's Jill. So I've enjoyed these, and Rebecca, I listened in on your prior one where you talked about the various chapters, and then you've got the prologue and the epilogue. So in the epilogue, will we see sort of a summation of the message of the opera, or is there some take on, all right, which of the 3 chapters is the best in a woman's love life, or what kind of judgment is going to be made at the end of this thing?
The judgment at the end, at least as far as the libretto is concerned, is surprisingly perhaps not about the women at all. I think we have to think about those individually as they go along. It's about the merits of comedy and whether comic opera is worthwhile pursuing. Are people tired, as Thalie says at the beginning, is everybody tired of weeping and they want to laugh now? So she claims victory at the end, but then Terpsichore, that Pascale is playing, comes in and says, what are you talking about? It's the dancing that makes this show. So it's the aesthetic argument among the muses, I think, that's the last thing that we're left with. And I'll be interested to see how Catherine and the choreographers and the singers, how all of you handle this and what message we're left with. And I gather we're not going to know yet until we see it. Is that correct?
That is correct. The knowing is in the doing, and right now we all need to get together and do the do.
Yeah.
Like in the process. That's why this doing works like this are so important, because if they just remain in the land of theory, then we're just pontificating about a lot of stuff we know nothing about. But as soon as you have to sing that role or dance to that music and then and play those characters, everything just is in this realm of who knows.
Well, I'm excited to see how you integrate disco into the 18th century.
We all, yes, that's for
Not
sure.
as hard as you would think.
Well, I think at this point, I'd like to turn things over to Korneel because he's been fundamental in this whole process of bringing the 18th century up to the 21st century in many ways. And Korneel, as you just saw him sitting at the harpsichord, and he's going to be the harpsichordist for this production and will be performing it. But he's also here now already because, as I understand it, Korneel, you are going to be rehearsing the singers. And coaching the singers during this rehearsal process. So you're a very, very fundamental person there. And you also prepared the score, where I had a certain amount of back and forth with you during that process of getting the score ready. But before I turn, I do want to come back to all those questions, but I just first wanted to say about Korneel that he's a remarkable musician who is from Belgium, but who works all over Europe and is participating in many, many groups and has a solo career as well as an ensemble one. He's a conductor as well as he is a harpsichordist. And I think it's just a fabulous thing to have him here. But let me go back to the score, because I think that underlies all of what we're talking about here. This work is 300 and something years old now, 310 years old. And so the sources date from 1714 and a little bit after that. There's some that come a little bit later, but they're basically 300 years old. And there you are having to create something that modern performers can use today. Could you talk about that process?
Sure. Well, I can try. First of all, thank you for having me. Second, apologies in advance for all the mistakes against English not being my first language, but I'll try. Yeah, it's a very interesting process to have to tackle with sources 300 years old, and then sources as a plural, in print, in manuscript, with additions from existing performances. So you have all these layers, all these different versions of the same work, basically, that you have, and then you're confronted with the fact that you have to make a performance edition. You have to perform the work, so you have to make decisions as to what you keep, what you don't keep, what version you follow, why. I'm not a musicologist, but still I try to, as much as I can, and didn't forget, quote and keep a sort of book, what I used where, so if ever someone wants to take a different decision, that it's still possible. But it's a very interesting process, because for me, trained as a musician and a conductor and as a composer earlier on, and also being a teacher and a little bit of a researcher and everything together, it really has all the interests that I have. Beautiful typography, dealing with a lot of text and poetry, and even there, some decisions had to be made. Readily Bretter wasn't agreeing with some of the sources. My passion for harmony as a continuo player, where the later sources have different chords sometimes than the earlier sources. So it's a lot of back and forth, making decisions, trying, playing, going back, and then so on. But it's very interesting because you really feel that you're sort of creating something new based on things that are 300 years old. I mean, it hasn't been performed since, let's say, the French Revolution. So it's even an honor to say that we can do it again here at Opera Lafayette. But at the same time, I mean, we live today, so having the arrogance to say that we will completely do it as in the 18th century, as it has been done, we will never know it. But we should at least try to start from that point and make something useful today for the production. So it's a very interesting, complicated process. It took me about 6 months to go from the first note that I edited on the computer to the last one. 6 months, of course, not every day, because I had a lot of other things to do also. And then even today, just when I arrived here, I played through the opera, and I found some mistakes still. So there will be plenty of mistakes still to be corrected. But that's what happens with the creation. I mean, even in the manuscripts, there are mistakes. So in my score, obviously, there are mistakes as well, but I will try to correct them afterwards. And little by little, we'll make decisions and we'll get a beautiful performance in a couple of weeks. But what it will be in the definitive form, I think no one knows yet.
Well, one of the things that always happens when you're making additions, of which I've done some myself too, is that you confront the libretto on one hand and the score on the other. And in this case, there's more than one score, more than one version of the score. And you always run across places where there are disagreements and there are conflicts. You know, what the words may be this way in the libretto, and then you look at the score and say, no, 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 that's not what the singers are saying at all. They have a different sentence here. And so then how do I choose? So there's issues like that have to be settled. And I just wanted to say, I don't know how you felt about this, Korneel, but when I was looking at Orion too, for that matter, if Orion is there, and Pascale, the libretto, this particular libretto struck me as much more colloquial and much less formal than many of the other librettos from the same period in France. The French is more, I mean, it's still poetry. It's not conversational French, but it's less lofty. You know, it's not aiming to reproduce Corneille and Racine the way Quinault was when he was writing librettos for
Right.
Very,
Well,
very,
it goes with the subject matter, you know, we're not talking about the Le Cid. We're talking about La Femme.
Right, but that was apparently an issue because clearly Lafont got pushback on that, because when he wrote a thing later saying that people were shocked at certain things, and he claimed that they were shocked about, he didn't say the language per se, but the subtext is that he was talking about his language, his choice of language. And so that's why when in the critique at the end, when he says, when Momus comes in, the god of mockery, and says to Thalie, who claimed she had written the libretto, she said, well, I'm glad I didn't write it. So he was essentially criticizing himself for the colloquialisms that he put into this libretto. It's really interesting to see that being built right into the opera. Okay, let's see, let's go, Korneel, going on though. So you're going to be coaching the singers. Could you talk about, I know you haven't started working with these singers yet, but you've done a lot of this same process with in other operas. Could you talk about what that involves?
Yeah, well, the conductor for this production, Christophe Rousset, is, well, he was my second teacher as a harpsichordist. And from that position, he took me on his own path as conductor of L'étonnant Lyrique, and that involves a lot of opera. And my main job, if you want, there is to be there when he's not and to prepare everything. So when he arrives, he can just start working musically. So what that means is that I actually have different things to do. First of all, in this case, just getting through the score, rehearsing, correcting if any mistakes are there in notes or text. I mean, French is not my second language, not my first. I assume for people here who don't speak French, not too obviously, there will be some corrective work there also, but we're many people who know and understand French. But it also means, for instance, memorizing, because of course it's a stage production. So repeating things as often as possible, especially the choirs, for instance, where you have just to put things together, memorizing dialogues in the recits, putting things together so it all fits. I have a list of tempos or tempo indications from the conductor that I have to install so he can just start working. So that's one thing. Another thing, of course, is a style. It's probably the same with Baroque dance, of course. There's many ways to look at French Baroque music or music in general. The score tells us only so much, and in Baroque music, that's often very little. There's hardly any indication about tempo, and even if there is, I mean, if you could say it is a gavotte, for instance, a dance, you have quicker gavottes, you have slower gavottes. The same in the receipts. There's no indication, but of course, the text and the mood of the singer tells us something. But even there, the stage director can have an interpretation that is conflicting with the music director. So my job is to prepare the singers for different options while keeping a sort of coherent storytelling and style also. What I was saying, every singer, or what you were saying, every singer is coming from different places, different productions, different backgrounds, different experience also in his music. So they might have a different vision on how to perform his music, what type of ornaments. I could go very specific, but I will leave that for another time. My job is also just to get everyone more or less in the same style or the same interpretation of the style. So that's perhaps my preparation work or what I do in these coming few days. Then when the conductor will arrive, I will be going to the harpsichord mainly to play under his conducting, which I will also do in the performances. So I will be playing the harpsichord, which involves all the recits also. So I'll be working a lot with the singers, which is very nice. And in absence of the conductor, since I do all the preparation work, I will be there should there be anything to solve or to go listen in the hall or something. I mean, I'm at his disposal as an assistant if you want. So doing all of that from the score creation to preparing the singers to also making the performances as a harpsichordist. I mean, I have sort of the full scope of the work preparation and performance. So it's absolutely a joy.
May I ask you more, the two of you actually, about the recitatives and handling the recitatives, because French recitative can be so subtle and so dependent upon the language. And are you accompanying the recitative just you, or will there be a cellist or a gambist or somebody else playing along with you? And how do you coordinate? I mean, will Christophe be conducting at that point, or is he leaving it up to you to coordinate with the singers?
Yeah, there will be a gamba playing, and even there, I mean, historically it would be all the basses, probably all the basse de violon, all the, I mean, the sort of petit chœur accompanying the recits. So in this case, it's just one harpsichord, one string bass instrument. For the recits, they are notated in a very particular style, which is typically for French music. They're completely written in bars, in measures. So where you go from a bar of 3 to a bar of 2 to a bar of 4. So very, very specifically. And then there's two views how to perform them. You could either say that we completely respect the notation and we stay in the tempo as notated, which is a straightforward solution. And then a lot of conductors would also conduct them. The way Christophe Rousset does it is that within the recit, there are certain small arias, small airs that have a tempo, but the rest should be, as the word says, as parlando as possible, really declamation, really recitative, that you have a dialogue or a monologue, or that you're not, how should I say it, not following the notation, but that somehow the notation is following the text. So if you look at it from a composer's point of view, you could use the pen and paper to really notate exactly what you want, which sometimes happens. Or you could want to notate it in a form that a singer can read it and understand it and do something with it, which I think is the view of Christophe Rousset. So the notation is very straightforward in bars, so you have a sense of the pulsation of the music, of the flow, of the phrasing. But then, of course, you have to work that it becomes a sort of natural thing, that the audience doesn't listen to music in bars of 3. Because then you're listening to music in bars of 3 instead of a text that coincidentally follows a bar of 3. So normally Christophe doesn't conduct anything. Perhaps if there is a small aria, he will give a little pickup or something. So we're all together, also depending on how far the singers are on stage. And then it's just between me and my colleague on the string bass to follow and to listen. And the more we communicate, the less together we will be with the singer. It's a very simple, should I say it, line. So if you have a singer doing something and we have to follow that and we listen to the singer, then it's just a one-on-one direction. While you have the singer and you have a conductor and you have me and you have the gamba player, and the conductor and the singer is doing something that the conductor wants and the conductor shows it to me and I show it too. You see there's multiple people involved, so it will slow down. So the best thing is just to do it as often as possible and to learn and adapt to what the singers do, and then hoping for the best. It's
So where in the pit will you be sitting? Are you at one end or the other, or are you in the middle?
Mostly I'm in the middle, but that will depend on the location. I have no idea what the size of the theaters will be. It's my first time in the States, so I'm completely new here. But it might also depend just on what the stage is like. I have been, for instance, in Vienna, in the Staatsoper, which is a huge stage. The orchestra pit goes under the stage for the same in New York, for instance, in the Metropolitan, because you need a big orchestra sometimes. If you're placed there under as a harpsichordist, you don't hear the singer, but you're very central in the orchestra, so it works for other things. While if you really need to see or hear the singer better, you might be placed completely at the other side, even at the back, so you can have one eye on the stage, which will sound less in the hall, but will have more contact. So it all depends on what works, what doesn't work, what the sound is like, what the contact is like. That's not up to me to decide, but we'll see. Yeah.
Well, let me ask Pascale, when you're singing Baroque opera and you're singing recitative, what do you prefer? Where do you like to have the harpsichordist, the continuo section sittings? What makes sense for you as a singer on the stage?
I much prefer to have some kind of visual contact, or to know that I can do, you know, before I come in, or like just give a little signal, you know, or, you know, see the viols bow, you know, because we don't always hear. When we're on stage, we don't always hear what's going on very clearly in the pit, from the pit. So it's really, it's like a lifeline to have a visual contact. So yes, that's what I prefer. So that's what we'll have.
So tomorrow you are going to the theater and you're going to be trying, will you see the space tomorrow, or maybe not? I don't know.
No, not until
We're staying here.
a few days, just not until a few days before the premiere.
It's wonderful that you have basically a month though before the performances start to pull this all together. That's a nice long rehearsal time.
Right. I mean, it seems like a long time, but in practice, often you can always hope for more.
Yeah.
Because in that 1 month, we have to go through musical rehearsals and all the language coaching things, and then the stage and getting used to, for the singers to being on stage and memorizing everything.
And then you're gonna have orchestra rehearsals?
Yes, at the
With
same time.
only the orchestra?
Yeah. And then, of course, dance is always is also involved. So they also need time, and then they have to put everything together, and then with costumes, and then 5 weeks will go really fast. So
It'll go really fast.
It's only just 3.5, because you know, once you can tweak some things once you're on stage, like once you're on stage and doing the dress rehearsal, but 95% of the work has to be done before. 98.
Also, just because of there's too many people involved. I have now a couple of days to work musically, and with all the people involved for the text, so we can focus on that. Once the stage director and the choreographer will start to work, and something is not to my liking or to Christophe's liking, and we interrupt that process, then we're slowing down the stage. So, at a certain moment you will have to correct things, of course. But it's very good to have a dedicated period of time for everything that has not to do with stage, just musically. And then we know our place and we back off a little while the stage is working.
And then everything goes to hell.
Exactly.
Because we're trying to dance, we're trying to, be in the space, we're trying to do movement, and the music just, sorry, I should have said goes out the door. But it's true, and you'll get frustrated, and we'll get frustrated, but it all happens in the end.
That's the difficulty and the enormous thing that opera singers have to do. It's not just singing; it's also acting, it's dancing, it's everything. But that takes time just to build that for every production again, because you have a different conductor with a different style and a different stage director with a different style, and all these new influences. You should be talking about that perhaps better than I am. I can just watch it and have popcorn. But it's always back and forth. And a lot of frustration. But in the end, it'll be fine. I hope.
But this is also exciting because, well, exciting and terrifying. I assume that this is a work that nobody's ever performed before. None of the people that are involved in this production. It's the first time for everybody. So you're discovering it and creating it at the same time, and it's not like you're doing La Boheme for the millionth time. It's
right.
You're taking something. It's all new.
Yeah. Which is exciting indeed, because you can really start from a clean slate. There's no interpretation you can listen to, or that you can, because you listen to it, that you just unconsciously adapt to. So everything will be created by the people involved in this production. It also means, and that's the big fear, of course, that if someone gets ill, there is no one to replace you, because no one has ever done it before.
Well, you can.
I can. I'm a very good singer. No, but yeah, often when you do a production that has been done, not a production, but a musical work, an opera that has been done before, you see that a lot of stage directors and even musical conductors try to do something new just because they want to do something new, because so many people have done it already. This is not here. I mean, we can just do it very honestly, very respectfully towards everything that we know, everything we want to do. There's no pretension, or we don't have to pretend to do something that perhaps is not necessary. I'm not saying that in all the other productions that happens, but there is a tendency to profile yourself as a conductor or as a stage designer, to do something new, which in this case, I mean, it will be new already, so we can just make it work.
In a way, it's a bit like-
c'est toujours simple et compliqué.
But in a way, it's like doing a contemporary opera that nobody's ever heard. Nobody can compare us to anybody else, you know? There's something very liberating about that.
So Jace, it looks to me like there might be some questions in the chat. Is that correct? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah,
there.
no, that was me telling people if they have any questions, they're free to unmute and ask, or they
Yes,
can-
please do. Please do. I'm sure this is so exciting. You must have some things you want more that you would like to know.
I was gonna say right now, I'm not seeing any. Just as a general reminder, this evening we do have to hop off right at 7 since they do have a rehearsal right after this program.
Ah, right.
So
Oh,
I just
good.
wanna put
That's
that out
right.
there. So if you do have any, please feel free to go ahead and share.
So I'm the properties person for your production. I look forward to working with you. So no, that's all I have to
It's
say.
nice to meet you.
Yes. That's it.
That's great. Yeah, it must be fun to be involved in this production, I should think.
Yes, it is. Well, thank you.
I was gonna say, I guess if we have no further questions, we can end a little early. So
Oh,
definitely.
no, I would like to ask Ryan, I would ask Ryan because could you talk, we were talking a little bit about the rehearsal process and how everybody's just starting to get together now. This is the first night that they will all meet each other. Do you have anything more that you would like to share about how you set up the rehearsal process and how this is going to all work out?
Oh, well, we're in my living room, so I have to put all the chairs all around, and we're expecting 11 people this evening. And many of them are meeting for the first time. And so, and then I get to hear music in the house for 6 days before we move out to Virginia to a rehearsal space. And then, as you mentioned, I think, then we're in Virginia staging for a few weeks, and then we move to the hall, and we have to put it together very quickly in the hall itself. But we've and frankly, I've already been on the phone with the whole cast, sort of talking through the text and the French, and try to sort of see because everybody's at a different stage of experience with this kind of music, because so few people do it. So we're just trying to kind of get it all together and then introduce them tonight, and hope that the chemistry comes together and everybody has a great time learning it. So.
Well, it seems like you're off to a good start with Korneel and Pascale, who are just meeting each other for the first time and seem to be establishing a rapport right here before our very eyes.
Well, they haven't come to blows yet, but there's still time.
There's time.
That's very great to see. Any other questions? Actually,
But-
Julia, are you there? Can you hear me? Julia Doe, are you there?
Yes.
Yes. I was wondering, because you have worked so much on opera comique, which is a different genre, and then it has talking in it, not just, and so the dialogue, the recitatives are replaced by conversation. But I'm just wondering about the whole spirit of the work. Do you see any resonances between maybe some of the works, the opera comique kinds of things that Opera Lafayette has done in the past that you worked on, and this particular work, which is so much earlier?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I mean, on the one hand, there is something so special about the opera ballet format and the sort of the fragment question. Like, it was much more unusual in opera comique, and Bruce could also weigh in on this, to have the sort of separate acts, because an opera comique would either be like shorter in itself or sort of a more singular dramatic arc. But of course, the sort of in the present, the sort of in the present in France concerns are really, really forecasting, and also sort of the incorporation of some of these Italianisms, some of these simpler aria styles are really forecasting what's coming next. There are a couple of sort of mid-century opera comique that are more festive, like Les Soirées des Boulevards, which is just sort of like scenes on the boulevards, which could be sort of a transposition of this material. But yeah, there's something that is both so forward-looking and so unique about this work. I think it's going to be really exciting.
I was
I mean, this
interested when you
of
said,
course, was
Becky,
performed. Oh, sorry, what?
well, Becky, when you were saying that you were thinking the language was more colloquial. And of course, you have that opportunity in comedy to have it more colloquial. I immediately thought of the piece that both Pascale and Julia Doe were very involved with, of Grétry, Les Preuves Villageoises. And that, when we read the text for that, none of us, even Pascale, who's, you know, as she says, a native French speaker, could figure out there are all these commas about drop, and you drop all these syllables.
Yeah, they're trying to imitate peasant speech and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it really, that is the one opera comique that went to the extreme in terms of going the colloquial that we've done in the past. And that Julia had written quite a bit about that for us.
Yeah, well, I have to
So
say, oh, I just one little remark, and then that the colloquialisms in this are relative, because this is still the Paris opera, and you can't you can lower the language a little bit. But you can't go down as far as you could in the theaters where the Opéra Comique was performed. You know, there are different registers, and the register has to be relatively high, but it's noticeably different than it is for other works being performed at the same time. Sorry, Julia, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that in the opera comique of the later 18th century, like Ryan is mentioning, there's a very weird medley of like patois, very countrified patois shaped into very formal verse structures. So there's all sorts of interesting ways that you can play with register in form and in style and in content. It's really smart of you to point that out. Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of see it in the prologue of this opera when Muse of Tragedy comes out and she speaks in these grand phrases, and then Thalia comes out and speaks in these shorter, funnier phrases.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the kind of spot I was thinking of. Right. Yeah. So that'll be fun to see how that gets embodied. You know, who's singing Melpomene and has that grand role, pompous role that she sings at the beginning. What else is that singer singing later on in the opera? She must be doing something. I don't even know who it is.
I'm sorry. What is Angel? You're asking what is Angel singing?
The woman whoever it is, and I don't even know who it is, who's singing
Angel is
Tragedy. What else is she doing?
She sings Doris in to the friend of Pascale in love of Coquette.
Great.
So and of course there she has to do a very fast filigree aria. So she really is she's a very versatile singer.
That's great
in this opera. But she has that kind of commanding presence and voice that will fit well for when we open this opera. We think suddenly, oh, is it going to be a tragedy? And then no, not at all.
Right. Anybody else have more questions that you would like to ask before we wrap this up? Any more?
Just one thought that occurred to me having to do with opéra comique in this genre. It might be actually more viable to revive a fully composed opera such as this with continuous music than maybe one of his théâtre italien pieces where you have divertissement, but long stretches of no music and just the actors on stage speaking. And that's not something you can ask people to pay for these days, having musicians sitting around for long lengths of time.
Well, Catherine Tarosi and I did some Mouret from his Italian days at Korneel several years ago, and we just did the divertissement. We didn't try to do any of the speaking part.
I did a production of an opera by an Italian composer, but he did it in France, and I had his name and now it's gone, but they did do you know, some interludes of acting, but they made it very contemporary. They were linked to link the acts together.
But we've had to, of course, deal with that loads with all the opera comiques that we've staged over the years. And we've done it in many different styles. You know, sometimes we've done French dialogue. Sometimes we've done the dialogue in English. Sometimes we've had a narrator telling the story and other actors pantomiming it. And sometimes we've incorporated a new character who's kind of like a narrator who within to the action. So it really, when you're trying to figure out how to do a popular entertainment like opéra comique around the world in different places where people speak different language, it's really tricky to try to find the right tone to bring it off. So we've done a lot of experimenting, and hopefully some of them have touched people and at least given the spirit of the original. Because of course those opera comiques, when they were performed in Germany, or they were done in the German language, and many of them got all around Europe into many different countries, and have got bent out of shape in the meantime too.
Can I just ask one quick follow-up question on that? When you're doing the opéra comique, are you tempted, or is one of the experiments been to shorten the dialogue to
You know, it's
change the balance between the music and the speaking?
Yeah, most of the time we end up cutting some of the dialogue. Yeah, and in fact, in that respect, it's true. We don't quite really. I think we know we're dealing mostly with an opera audience, and which has a limited attention span for the dialogue, and so we have almost always cut the dialogue to the bare essentials.
Well, excuse me for interrupting, but I just noticed on my watch, and it's now 1 minute past 7, and everybody has this rehearsal ahead of them. So I think we had better thank them all very, very much and let them go to the next stage of their production here. But it's been a very
Nobody's on the doorbell yet, but thank you so much, Becky.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure. I look forward to this so much. So thank you all. And thank you
To
to
all of our speakers and everyone who decided to